What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back with the box office breakdown for Sunday, February 1st, a weekend where something really cool happened. A self-funded horror film, Iron Lung, with a budget of $3 million, managed to open in the number 2 spot with $18 million. Based on a 2022 indie game, the movie was directed and self-distributed by YouTuber Markiplier, aka Mark Fishback, and starred Troy Baker, who is best known as the original Joel in the video game series The Last of Us. And I'm fired up about this for a variety of reasons. First of all, I had no clue what this movie was, giving me a nice kick in the pants that I need to up my game when it comes to my awareness of video games being adapted for the big screen. But having now seen the trailer, I'm legitimately excited to check it out. But more importantly, I love seeing a successful YouTuber with 38 million subscribers translating that audience into the movie business successfully, and I'd like to see a lot more YouTubers follow that example. And we saw last year when Chris Stuckman attempted a similar thing with his movie Shelby Oaks, but that movie was kind of met with mixed success. But the success of Iron Lung, it's undeniable. And for years I've worried that platforms like YouTube or TikTok or Instagram have been kind of draining film culture of a lot of the talent that once upon a time might have become successful independent filmmakers. But this kind of do-it-yourself garage band endeavor that completely bypasses the traditional studio system, that's what the spirit of independent filmmaking is all about. Plus, it gives the movie biz some new IP instead of constantly remaking and regurgitating the same old shit from the past. So for me, this is a win across the board, and it puts a big giant smile on my face. And what it reminds me of a little bit is of the early days of yet another filmmaker who took the number 1 spot, Sam Raimi in his new movie Send Help, starring Rachel McAdams. Now, early on in the weekend, it looked like Iron Lung might take the number 1 spot. However, Send Help ultimately prevailed with $20 million. However, keep in mind, Send Help was made for $40 million and had the marketing machine of Disney. Disney owns Fox, and Fox created Send Help. And it obviously benefited from the brand name recognition of Sam Raimi, as well as the star power of the lovely Rachel McAdams. Now, I did not care for Send Help, and I'm not going to kind of regurgitate or relitigate all my review here, but if you want to hear my thoughts on the film, I'll leave a link in the description below. But even if I didn't care for the movie, it's still cool seeing an original news story take the number 1 spot, which is so rare these days. And I've said this many times in the past, if you're a filmmaker, a young filmmaker or an old filmmaker, and you want to tell a new original story, not based on a movie that came out a long time ago, the horror genre should be your home. And for whatever reason, that is the one genre where like true originality is not only encouraged, but it's like frequently rewarded. And Send Help did not have Sam Raimi's name attached to it. Who knows how well it might have done, but Sam Raimi's earned his reputation the hard way over many, many decades of hard work. He did his time in the trenches making low-budget horror movies, and then in the 90s did his time in the trenches making westerns and thrillers and all kinds of movies before finally graduating to blockbuster movies, making his Spider-Man trilogy. So no matter what Sam Raimi does with his career, he will always have my love and affection for that incredible hot streak that basically lasted from Evil Dead through Drag Me to Hell. That was like a 30-year hot streak. That was pretty good. I just haven't really liked his last 3 movies. But the short version of my main complaint about Send Help is that it was an uneven contest. And if your movie's just going to be about 2 people fighting to the death on the island, there needs to be some sort of uncertainty in the contest. Like last night, I went to Madison Square Garden to watch some boxing. And in boxing, for people who don't know, there are weight classes. And in theory, but not always, the goal is to have 2 opponents who are more or less evenly matched. Otherwise, one fighter gets accused of kind of padding their record by defeating and knocking out a bunch of tomato cans. And in Send Help, we have a situation where Rachel McAdams is basically knocking out a tomato can because he's got no charm, he's got no survival skills, he's got no useful skills of any kind. He's intensely unlikable.
Take your seats, you're a little bitch.
So basically, the audience is expected to sit there and cheer for an hour and 40 minutes as a girl who is subjected to some office hazing gets revenge on her horrible boss. But I'm sorry, that's not much of a movie. At a minimum, he should have had the potential to possibly seduce her, make it interesting in some way, shape, or form. But at no point in that hour and 40 minutes did I doubt the outcome. So for me, it was fucking lame and it was fucking boring. And if you want the full version of my review, once again, I'll link it in the description below. But going back to the positive side, this is at least Sam Raimi proven that he's still got it. He can have a number 1 movie that's not a Marvel movie, that's not a Wizard of Oz movie, that it can be a new, fresh, original concept, whether it's a horror movie or a thriller or any kind of genre entertainment that he chooses to create. So that's cool. And also, with a budget of $40 million, that movie is going to be wildly profitable in the very near future.
I am a much nicer boss than you ever would have been, except for maybe this part.
Also, speaking of movies that are wildly profitable, I saw a stat a couple days ago that on a budget of $34 million, Housemaid has crossed $300 million worldwide, and it's about to head to digital. And there's a chance that Housemaid might be even more popular in digital than it was in the theater. I mean, if there was ever a more obvious example of the audience ringing the alarm bell saying, please give us more erotic thrillers, especially those that star Sydney Sweeney, Holy shit. I mean, I feel like every once in a while the audience kind of sends up a signal flare. It's like, we want more of X. And clearly, erotic thrillers, they can be made so inexpensively, and when they hit big. All you basically are paying for are the stars. So I hope that there are people taking notes and realizing, all right, the housemaid just basically like made 10 times its original budget. Perhaps we should flood the market with more erotic thrillers like we had back in the 1980s and the 1990s. But perhaps the most unusual box office story of the weekend is for the movie which opened in the number 3 spot, Melania, the documentary about the First Lady of the United States. A movie which, this is bizarre, a documentary which cost far more than the movies which opened in the number 1 and number 2 spot. Usually documentaries are made relatively inexpensively for a couple $100,000 or maybe like 1 or 2 million. But Melania, I don't know how much it was made for, but it was acquired by Amazon for $40 million, and then they spent $35 million on the marketing spend. I mean, we're getting into strange and interesting territory here because I try to avoid politics like the plague on this channel. I feel like whether you're left, right, and center, as long as you love movies, you have a home here at this channel, and I'm happy to talk flicks with you all day. But Melania obviously takes us into partisan territory, so I'm going to completely dodge the bullet by deferring to Rebecca Rubin's analysis over at Variety, where I feel like she actually has a pretty calm, rational, balanced view about what Amazon's goals might be, what Trump's goals might be, what everybody's goals might be related to this documentary. But first and foremost, for a documentary to open in number 3, a documentary that's not based on like a rock and roll concert or anything like that, that's incredibly unusual. So just pause for a moment and appreciate the fact that the top 3 movies this weekend, none of them were major franchise movies. One was an original thriller, one was a super low-budget indie movie based on an indie video game, and one was a documentary about politics. I'm regarding this weekend as just a win overall because what we need in the marketplace more than anything else is variety, new movie-going experiences that are not based on popular movies from the past, because let's just be blunt and honest about it. Right now, pretty much every single show or movie that is based on something that was popular in the past, the current iteration completely and totally sucks ass. Stuff like Starfleet Academy, but don't let me get distracted talking about Starfleet Academy. Let's head over to Variety for an article titled Box Office, Melania Doc Beats Expectations with $7 million debut. Sam Raimi's Send Help lands at number 1 with $20 million. Melania, a documentary that shadows the First Lady of the United States in the lead up to Donald Trump's second presidential inauguration, is eclipsing box office expectations. The film has generated $7.04 million from 1,778 North American theaters, a huge start for a documentary, especially one that doesn't involve music and isn't about a concert. Projections, which fluctuated throughout the weekend, launched above pre-release estimates of $3 to $5 million. Amazon MGM spent a staggering amount of money on the film, acquiring the doc for $40 million and then shelling out $35 million on the marketing spend. Theater owners keep about half of ticket sales, which would make it difficult to justify the theatrical cost of Melania. However, a deep-pocketed streamer like Amazon cares about much more than box office grosses. The studio plans to recoup some of its costs when Melania lands on its Prime streaming service after its theatrical run. Melania will need to generate around $40 million to $45 million at the domestic box office to break even, according to sources familiar with the economics of similar films. Those sources believe that Melania has secured lucrative licensing deals that will offset the high promotional costs. We're very encouraged by the strong start and positive audience response, with early box office for Melania exceeding our expectations, as Amazon MGM's head of domestic theatrical distribution, Kevin Wilson. This momentum is an important first step in what we see as a long-tail life cycle for both the film and the forthcoming docuseries, extending well beyond the theatrical window into what we believe will be a significant run for both on our service. We are confident in the long-term value this rollout will deliver to customers both in theaters and for years to come on Prime Video. And here's where it gets really interesting for the demographic info. For Melania, opening weekend crowds were mostly older women. 72% of ticket buyers were female, and 83% were above the age of 45, according to Amazon MGM. Nearly 75% of audiences were white, with Hispanic the next largest demo at 11% of ticket buyers. Meanwhile, the top movie-going markets were outside of traditional locations like New York City and Los Angeles, and included Dallas, Orlando, Tampa, Phoenix, and West Palm Beach, cities where the president is popular. Melania may have one of the largest discrepancies between audience sentiment and critical reviews. The film boasts an A grade on CinemaScore exit polls, as well as a blistering 6% average on Rotten Tomatoes. Holy moly. And just from my own point of view, this movie was so far off my radar, I don't think I'd ever even heard Melania's voice ever until I saw the trailer for this movie.
Here we go again.
The idea of going to see a documentary about Melania was the last thing on my mind this past weekend, but clearly there was an audience for this flick. But getting back to the article, there's been outsized media coverage about Melania, at least compared to other documentaries, because of the lavish price tag and the president's own promotional push. He called Melania a must-watch and claimed that showtimes are selling out fast on social media platforms. Meanwhile, the film's subject tweeted over the weekend that the doc is loved by all. Amazon MGM's mega spend for Melania has raised questions about the company's motivations. Was this film really about its interest in an insider account of the White House, or an attempt to cozy up to the current administration? As good as this opening is for a documentary, for any other film, opening like this against $75 million in costs with very little foreign potential would be a problem. But this is a political investment, not a for-profit movie venture, says David A. Gross, who runs the movie consulting firm Franchise Entertainment Research. If it helps Amazon with a regulatory, taxation, tariff, or other government issue, then it'll pay back. $75 million is insignificant to Amazon. Melania is opening in theaters against a backdrop of political unrest, with ICE raids in Minneapolis and other parts of the country prompting a bipartisan backlash. Brett Ratner, whose credits include Rush Hour and X-Men: The Last Stand, directed the film, marking the first project since his career was derailed in 2017 by sexual assault allegations. He has denied those accusations. Rolling Stone reported that 2/3 of the crew members who worked on Melania in New York asked that their names not be formally credited on the documentary. All right, let me slow down and just catch my breath. There's so much shit there to unpack and discuss that I kind of don't even know where to start. I'd kind of forgotten about Brett Ratner, and I was never a massive fan of Brett Ratner. I guess Rush Hour might have been my peak interest in Brett Ratner.
Jump around. Which one of y'all kicked me?
I mean, Rush Hour, that movie was entertaining as fucking shit. I mean, back in the 1990s, when Jackie Chan suddenly exploded in the Western world, the rest of the world knew that Jackie Chan was a bad motherfucker, and for whatever reason in America, it took us a long time to catch up. But in the 90s, when his ship finally came in, he got big real fast. And Rush Hour was a huge part of it. And obviously, his chemistry with Chris Tucker was sublime. They were funny as fucking shit together. And after that, for basically about 10 years, Brett Ratner just subjected us to like 10 years of pop culture misery, where he just made like the most popular but also kind of vapid and bland blockbuster movies you could possibly imagine. And I never really was banging the drum for a return for Brett Ratner, but never in a million years would I have suspected that it would be a documentary about the First Lady that would provide the avenue by which he can make a return. But Brett Ratner, if he wants to return to showbiz, I mean, if he wanted to invest some of that blockbuster energy back into showbiz. I guess that's why I keep hearing about rumors about another Rush Hour movie coming out. But goddamn, Jackie Chan, he's like 75 years old now. It's gonna be a little more difficult for him to do some of those stunts. But hopefully he and Chris Tucker can reclaim that magic. But real quick, let me just check and see who is directing. It would be Rush Hour 4. Is that the new one? Brett Ratner. Okay, so now and I'm starting to see how this is all coming together. It's starting to seem to me that Making Melania was much less about the movie itself and much more about Amazon getting in good with the White House and Brett Ratner setting the stage for a comeback with Rush Hour 4. And given the nostalgia these days for late 90s entertainment, there's no reason to suspect why that movie won't do at least relatively well. Also, let me just add that I find it hilarious that all the filmmakers in New York, 2/3 of them, asked not to be formally credited, but they still accepted the paycheck because obviously New York is a left-of-center city. We have a communist mayor, and most people in the film industry here in New York tend to be left-of-center. However, they also like to work, and they also like to pay their bills. New York is an expensive city with very, very high rent, and it just shows how a lot of people's political convictions stop when it comes to, filling their bellies and paying their bills, which I can totally understand. But getting back to the article, Melania placed at number 3 on domestic box office charts behind two fellow newcomers, Sam Raimi's survival thriller Send Help and YouTube creator Markiplier's very indie adventure Iron Lung. After a close race, Send Help narrowly pulled ahead with $20 million from 3,475 North American locations. Disney in 20th Century's film collected a softer than expected 8.1 at the international box office, bringing its global tally to $28 million. That's a solid start for the $40 million production, which is expected to stick around beyond its debut thanks to great word of mouth and enthusiasm for original horror. Send Help brought out a younger male crowd. 53% were men, while 53% were between the ages of 18 to 34. The R-rated film earned a positive B+ grade on CinemaScore exit polls and a 93% Rotten Tomatoes average from critics. Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien star in Send Help as a looked-over employee and her toxic boss who gets stranded on a deserted island after a plane crash. And let me just rephrase that premise. Send Help is a masturbatory fantasy for anybody who's ever felt passed over in a toxic work environment. But getting back to the article, Iron Lung impressed in second place with 18 million from 3,015 cinemas. This turnout is especially notable because ticket sales nearly matched the result of a major release from Disney, but without mainstream resources. Markiplier, his real name is Mark Fishback, wrote, directed, financed, and distributed Iron Lung against a reported $3 million budget. Let me just pause to reiterate everything I said in the beginning of this video. That is so fucking cool that a YouTuber who could obviously continue to make piles of money just cranking out content on YouTube decided to kind of pause, regroup, reassess, and figure out what he wanted to do with his life. And he just reinvested $3 million of his own money and basically kind of put the big players in their place, because obviously Disney, when it comes to marketing resources and just all their existing relationships, you expect Disney to be able to generate $20 million with a movie like Send Help. But the fact that Markiplier was able to generate $18 million totally on its own, that might end up being the coolest independent success story of 2026. So high five to Mark Fishback, high five to everybody involved. I am in awe of what he was able to accomplish. Even if the film's box office performance is front-loaded, meaning Iron Lung quickly runs out of steam, it'll be a hugely successful endeavor for Fishback, who boasts 73 million followers across digital platforms. The YouTube star also leads the post-apocalyptic adventure, which is based on the 2022 indie game and follows a fugitive who has to scavenge natural resources in an ocean of blood after a rapture. Iron Lung doesn't have a cinema score, but boasts a 90% audience average on Rotten Tomatoes. According to exit polls, 60% of inaugural crowds were male, and 85% were between 18 and 34 years old. Meanwhile, 71% cited an actor in the lead role as their main reason for wanting to see the film. Alright, so the Troy Baker fans came out in droves, but also I find it interesting just how young the crowd was for this movie. One of my biggest complaints about a lot of big budget franchise movies these days is that they're made by old people for old people. Basically, men in their 50s who still want to go see movies that are made for 5-year-olds, which is what a lot of the kind of the sci-fi and superhero movies are made by Disney these days. But I like seeing a movie made by a younger crowd for a younger crowd thriving. We desperately need more young filmmakers, and we desperately need more young moviegoers. So yeah, everything about Iron Lung just puts a big giant smile on my face. But back to the article, Iron Lung is an extension of the Markiplier online phenomenon. This kind of thing happens a couple times a year when a fan frenzy comes to movies from another medium, Gross says. It's good news every time. It jolts the market with fresh energy. Yeah, let me add to that, not only fresh energy, but new blood, new faces. We desperately need new young filmmakers to inject some originality and some new styles and new points of view into the very tired, stale movie biz. But it wasn't all good news this weekend because Jason Statham kind of struggled. And as it says here in the article, Shelter tumbled to the number 6 spot with $5.5 million from 2,726 theaters in its first weekend of release. That's a dismal start against its $50 million production budget. The R-rated film is directed by Rick Rumen-Waugh, the filmmaker behind a slew of Gerard Butler-led action thrillers like Greenland and Angel Has Fallen. It follows a reclusive man who unwittingly sets off a violent chain reaction after he rescues a young girl from drowning in a terrible storm. Shelter is being released by a newer distributor, Black Bear, which plans to unveil the Matthew McConaughey-led The Rivals of Amzia King ensemble comedy Spa Weekend and Guy Ritchie's Wife and Dog over the next few months. In limited release, A24's Charlie XCX mockumentary The Moment scored with $427,940 from 4 screens, averaging $106,985 per location. A24 says it's the third biggest limited opening of the post-COVID era, as well as one of the biggest for A24 all time, behind only Marty Supreme and Uncut Gems. It's unclear how the momentum will sustain when The Moment expands nationwide. However, the Charlie-centric movie doesn't need to reach the box office heights of Marty Supreme or Uncut Gems to be financially successful. The Moment carries a modest $4 million price tag. Overall, this weekend was 83% above the previous frame, which was hobbled by a massive winter storm, though 5% below the same period last year. Through the first month of the year, grosses are 13% above 2025. Hollywood and cinema owners are hoping a range of blockbusters, from Avengers Doomsday and Spider-Man Brand New Day to Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey and the Super Mario Galaxy movie, will keep up momentum and propel revenues near pre-pandemic heights. Now let me have a look at my calendar for what's coming out this week. The only movie that I have a ticket for this week is Dracula from director Luc Besson, which came out, I think, in France last summer, but it's been delayed in North America until now. And I hope it'll be good. I mean, I've seen, I don't know how many adaptations of Dracula in my life, but I'm always down to watch another. But I'll need to consult the listings and dig a little deeper because the success of Iron Lung is a big slap in the face. I feel like I do a pretty good job of throwing out a wide net and trying to at least remain aware of what are the big upcoming indie movies and Hollywood movies, etc. and so forth. But Iron Lung totally blindsided me. It was just like completely off my radar. We're all in our own little media bubbles or information silos and that sort of thing. So I will check the listings again to see if there's anything else apart from Dracula coming out this week to get excited about. But then the following week, things start getting a little crazy. We have Good Luck, Have Fun, and Don't Die from Gore Verbinski after a 10-year, basically kind of like, I don't know, like retirement or absence or whatever the case might be. We have Wuthering Heights with Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi, and we have Crime 101. So, yeah, the following week will be very interesting in terms of box office and new releases, etc. and so forth. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Was that too harsh on Send Help? Was I not harsh enough? And how fucking stupid and oblivious was I not to see the Iron Lung phenomenon coming our way? I think that's cool as fucking shit. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I hope everybody has a great week, and I'll be back at y'all later this evening for a review of episode 3 of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. But I hope everybody has a great week, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.